I used to listen to this sound for hours. The steady, hopeful rhythm of my baby's heart. It was the only thing that felt real in a world that had become a nightmare. He called me a phase, a temporary chapter in his grand life story. But the woman he left me for, she had another name for herself. She called herself his Endgame, and she wasn't just a whisper in the shadows. She was a headline, a social media siren broadcasting my humiliation to the world. This isn't just a story about a cheating husband. It's about a war fought in boardrooms, on Instagram feeds, and in the silent, desperate moments of a woman left with nothing but the promise of a new life growing inside her. What would you do if the man you loved, the father of your child, erased you with a single word? The scent of 1,000 white roses clung to the air in our penthouse apartment, a fragrant testament to my husband's latest grand gesture. Liam Carrington loved grand gestures. They were as much a part of his brand as the tailored Tom Ford suits he wore and the audacious multi-billion-dollar tech deals he closed. From the outside, our life was a meticulously curated fairy tale. Liam, the self-made millionaire, the boy from a forgotten corner of Queens who had clawed his way to the apex of Manhattan's elite. And me, Evelyn Reed Carrington, the girl from a quiet Connecticut suburb, the art history major who had captured his heart. Our story was the kind tabloids adored. We'd met at a charity gala, a whirlwind romance that culminated in a lavish wedding at the plaza. He was 32, I was 26. He was driven, intense, a force of nature. I was, in his words, his calm in the storm. "You ground me, Evie," he would murmur into my hair, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through my very bones. "You're my sanctuary." For 5 years I had embraced that role. I managed our homes, the Park Avenue penthouse, the sprawling Hamptons estate, the charming villa overlooking Lake Como. I planned the society dinners, charmed his business partners, and stood by his side, a constant smiling presence as he built his empire, Carrington Innovations. Our life was a ballet of perfection, every step choreographed, every pirouette flawless. And now the final, most precious act was about to begin. I was 4 months pregnant with our first child, a son. Liam had been ecstatic, or so I thought. The day we found out, he'd lifted me off my feet, spinning me around in our sun-drenched living room, the city skyline a glittering backdrop to our joy. A son, Evie, an heir, our legacy. He'd commissioned a nursery that would have made royalty envious, complete with a hand-painted mural of constellations on the ceiling. He'd bought me a new, ridiculously expensive push present, a sapphire necklace that matched my eyes. Every action, every word seemed to reinforce the narrative we had so carefully built. We were the Carringtons. We were invincible. But lately a subtle dissonance had crept into our perfect symphony. It was nothing I could put my finger on, just a series of discordant notes. The late nights at the office became later, the business trips more frequent. When he was home, he was distant, his mind seemingly a million miles away, lost in the blue glow of his phone. The easy intimacy we once shared felt strained. The silence between us heavy with unspoken things. "Is everything okay, Liam?" I'd asked one evening, tracing the tense line of his jaw as he stared out at the city lights. He'd flinched almost imperceptibly before schooling his features back into a mask of placid reassurance. "Just stress, baby. A new acquisition. It's a monster deal." He'd kissed my forehead, a perfunctory gesture that held none of his usual warmth. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it." I'd let it go, just as I'd let go of the other small oddities. The faint scent of a perfume I didn't wear clinging to his suit jacket. The way he'd started password protecting his personal laptop, something he'd never done before. I was his sanctuary, his calm. Sanctuaries weren't supposed to ask too many questions. They were supposed to be a place of peace, of unwavering trust. And I trusted Liam. I had built my entire world on that trust. The first crack in my perfect world appeared not with a bang, but with a tap on a screen. I was scrolling through Instagram, a mindless distraction, while waiting for him to come home. The algorithm, in its infinite and often cruel wisdom, suggested a new profile to follow. The name was unfamiliar, Marin Cortez. The profile picture was a stunning brunette, her lips curved in a self-assured smirk, her eyes glinting with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. She was posed on the deck of a yacht, the sunset casting her in a golden glow. The background looked suspiciously like the view from our villa on Lake Como. I clicked on her profile. It was public, a curated feed of luxury and audacity. Designer clothes, exotic travel, champagne flutes, and cryptic captions that hinted at a life of unapologetic indulgence. There were pictures in Mykonos where Liam had supposedly been for a solo tech conference 2 months ago. A shot of her driving a vintage Porsche, remarkably similar to the one Liam kept at our Hamptons estate. A cold dread began to seep into my bones, chilling me despite the warmth of the apartment. It was circumstantial, I told myself. A coincidence. Manhattan's elite was a small, incestuous world. People traveled to the same places, drove the same cars. I was being paranoid. I was a pregnant woman, my hormones were running wild. But then I saw it. A post from 3 days ago. It was a close-up shot of her hand, perfectly manicured, resting on a man's arm. The man's face was out of frame, but the sleeve of his suit was visible, a distinctive Tom Ford design. And on his wrist was the vintage Patek Philippe watch I had given Liam for our 5th anniversary. The caption was what made my world tilt on its axis. 6 words that would come to haunt my waking and sleeping hours. He says, I'm his endgame. My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled frantically through her posts, my fingers trembling. The comments were a sycophantic chorus of praise. Queen, get it, girl. He's a lucky man. One comment stood out from a user named @ChloeBax, my best friend Chloe's account. My heart stopped. But a closer look revealed it was a fake profile using her picture. A calculated, cruel detail. The room suddenly felt airless, the scent of the roses cloying and suffocating. The grand gesture, the beautiful flowers, they weren't a celebration of our future. They were a smokescreen, a beautifully arranged lie. The sound of the key in the front door made me jump. Liam was home. I quickly locked my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had to confront him. I had to know the truth. But how? How do you ask the man you love if your entire life is a lie? He walked in, loosening his tie, a weary sigh escaping his lips. Long day, he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. He came over to me, leaning down to kiss me. I flinched, turning my head so his lips met my cheek instead of my mouth. He frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. Everything okay, Evie? And there it was, the opening. The moment to shatter the illusion. I took a deep breath, the words tasting like poison on my tongue. Liam, I began, my voice barely a whisper. Who is Marin Cortez? The name hung in the air between us, heavy and toxic. For a fleeting second, a flicker of genuine panic crossed Liam's face. It was there, and then it was gone, replaced by a cool, almost bored indifference that was far more chilling than any angry denial would have been. He straightened up, his 6'2" frame suddenly seeming to tower over me. He walked over to the bar, his back to me, and began to pour himself a scotch. The clinking of the ice against the crystal glass was the only sound in the room. Where did you hear that name? He asked, his voice low and devoid of emotion. I saw her Instagram. I said, my own voice gaining a sliver of strength from the adrenaline coursing through me. I saw your watch on her post, Liam. The one I gave you. The one you told me was in for repairs. He took a slow sip of his drink before turning to face me. The man looking at me was not the husband I knew. His eyes, usually so full of warmth and affection when they landed on me, were now cold, hard chips of ice. He looked at me as if I were a stranger, an inconvenience. You shouldn't be snooping, Evelyn, he said, his tone laced with a condescending disapproval. It's unbecoming. Unbecoming, I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. You're cheating on me, Liam, while I'm pregnant with your child, and you're worried about what's unbecoming. He sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation of breath, as if I were a petulant child throwing a tantrum. He set his glass down and walked towards me, his movement slow and deliberate. He stopped a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed, almost casual. "Look, Evie," he began, and the casualness of his tone was like a slap in the face. Us, it's been a great run. You've been wonderful. Exactly what I needed when I was building the company. You're beautiful, you're elegant, you're the perfect hostess. You played the part beautifully." "The part," I whispered, the words getting stuck in my throat. "The part of your wife." A small, cruel smile played on his lips. "Yes, the part of my wife. And you were very convincing. But things change, Evelyn. I've changed. My life is ascending to a new level. The kind of level that requires a different kind of partner." A different kind of partner. The pieces were clicking into place, each one a shard of glass in my heart. Like Marin Cortez. Marin is different, he said, a strange, almost reverent look in his eyes. "She's not a sanctuary, Evelyn. She's a battlefield. She challenges me. She's as ambitious as I am. She understands the world I operate in. She's not content to just stand by my side and look pretty. She wants to conquer the world with me." The cruelty of his words was breathtaking. He was taking everything I thought he loved about me, my calmness, my support, my devotion, and twisting it into a weakness, a liability. "So what was I, Liam?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What were the last 5 years of my life? What is this baby?" I placed a protective hand on my stomach, a gesture of pure instinct. His eyes followed the movement, and for the first time a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. It wasn't remorse. It was something closer to annoyance. And then he said the words that would forever be seared into my memory, the words that would become the anthem of my heartbreak. "Evelyn," he said, his voice soft, almost gentle, which made the words all the more brutal. "You're just a phase, a beautiful, wonderful phase, but a phase nonetheless. And this," he gestured vaguely towards my belly, "this is just an unfortunate complication." The world went silent. The city lights outside the window blurred into a meaningless smear of color. The scent of the roses was now nauseating the smell of decay. A phase. An unfortunate complication. My son. Our son. An unfortunate complication. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were floating above my own body watching this scene unfold. I saw myself standing there, my hand on my pregnant belly, my face a mask of shock and devastation. I saw the man I had loved, the man I had built a life with, standing before me, looking at me as if I were nothing more than a line item on a balance sheet that needed to be cleared. "Get out!" I said, the words coming out in a choked whisper. He raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me. Get out!" I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat, raw and primal. "Get out of my home. Our home. Evelyn." He corrected me, his voice still infuriatingly calm. "And I'm not going anywhere. This is my apartment. You're the one who will be leaving." He turned and walked back to the bar, picking up his scotch as if the conversation were over, as if he had just informed me that he was changing his brand of coffee. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity. The adrenaline that had propelled me forward had vanished, replaced by a cold, creeping numbness. He was right. It was his apartment, his money, his life. I was just a guest, a temporary resident. A phase. I walked zombie-like into our bedroom. His clothes were still hanging in the closet, his scent still lingering on the sheets. I pulled out a suitcase and began to pack, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there another second. As I was zipping up my suitcase, my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Against my better judgment, I looked. It was a new post from Marin Cortez, a professional-looking photo of her and Liam taken at what looked like a red carpet event. He was in a tuxedo, she in a slinky silver gown that left little to the imagination. His arm was wrapped possessively around her waist, and he was looking at her with an intensity, a raw adoration that he hadn't looked at me with in years. The caption was simple and aimed directly at me. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. The Endgame has begun. Hatch and Carrington power couple. Unstoppable. And beneath the caption, a single comment from a verified account, Marcus Vance Liam's right-hand man and COO of Carrington Innovations. The future is now. Congratulations, boss. The betrayal was complete. It wasn't just Liam. It was his entire world. They had all known. They had all watched as I'd blissfully planned a nursery for a baby he considered an unfortunate complication. They had all been in on the secret. My numbness gave way to a white-hot rage. A rage so intense it burned away my tears. He wanted me to leave, fine. I would leave, but I would not go quietly. I would not disappear like a phase. He had underestimated me. He had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my devotion for docility. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. I closed my suitcase, a new steely resolve hardening within me. He may have thought this was his endgame, but I was about to change the rules of the game. This was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a war, and I would not lose, for myself and for the tiny innocent life that was depending on me. The doorman, a kind-faced man named George, who had always treated me with a gentle deference, couldn't hide the pity in his eyes as I walked through the lobby, my single suitcase in tow. He called me Mrs. Carrington, as he always did, but the name felt like a costume I was desperate to shed. I didn't correct him. In that moment, I didn't have the strength. My first and only call was to Chloe. My Chloe. Not the imposter on Instagram, but the real fiercely loyal friend who had been my maid of honor and my anchor through every storm, though none had ever been like this. She answered on the first ring, her voice a cheerful, "Hey, Evie, how's my favorite future mama?" The dam broke. A sob thick and ragged escaped my lips. "Chloe," I managed to choke out. Can I come over? I'm buzzing you in right now," she said, her tone instantly shifting from cheerful to all business. She didn't need any other explanation. Chloe's apartment in the West Village was a cozy, cluttered haven, a world away from the sterile, minimalist perfection of my penthouse. Books overflowed from shelves. Colorful textiles were draped over furniture, and the air smelled of coffee and her signature lavender-scented candles. It smelled like home. She enveloped me in a hug the moment I stepped through the door, holding me tight as I sobbed uncontrollably, my carefully constructed composure shattering into a million pieces. She guided me to her worn velvet sofa, wrapped me in a quilt, and pressed a mug of chamomile tea into my trembling hands. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice soft but firm. And I did. I told her about the Instagram posts, the confrontation, the cold, cruel words Liam had used to discard me. I told her about Marin Cortez calling herself his endgame. I told her about Marcus Vance's public endorsement of their affair. By the time I finished, my voice was raw and the tea in my mug was cold. Chloe's face was a mask of cold fury. "That absolute bastard," she hissed, her eyes flashing. "That narcissistic, sociopathic, grade-A bastard. And Marcus, I always knew he was a weasel. The future is now. I'll show him the future." "What do I do, Chloe?" I whispered, feeling utterly lost. "He said he's kicking me out. He said the baby is an unfortunate complication." "Okay, first things first," Chloe said, her mind already working, strategizing. "We need to get you a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. We need a shark, a piranha, the kind of lawyer who makes men like Liam Carrington weep." She pulled out her laptop and started typing furiously. Chloe was a journalist, a damn good one, and her network of contacts was vast and varied. While she searched, I found myself numbly scrolling through Marin Cortez's Instagram feed again. It was a form of self-torture, but I couldn't look away. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Every post was a carefully crafted missile aimed at me. A picture of her wearing a diamond bracelet with the caption, "Some things are just meant to be." A selfie of her and Liam on a private jet clinking champagne glasses captioned, "To New Beginnings." She had even posted a picture of a ridiculously large modern art sculpture being delivered to a warehouse with the tag, "At Carrington Innovations New HQ Art Piece." The old one was just not to my taste. She was erasing me piece by piece, not just from Liam's life, but from the very company he had built, a company I had supported from the very beginning. "I found someone," Chloe announced, snapping me out of my trance. Her name is an old-school legal powerhouse, a name that strikes fear into the hearts of Manhattan's philandering husbands. She specializes in high-net-worth divorces, and her nickname is the Lioness. She sounds perfect. A divorce. The word felt foreign, unreal. Just yesterday I was planning a future with my husband. Now I was planning my divorce. "Yes, a divorce," Chloe said firmly. "And a settlement that will make his eyes water. You are not walking away from this with nothing, Evelyn. You are the mother of his child. In the eyes of the law, you are not a phase. You are his wife, and you have rights." The next morning, Chloe, dressed in what she called her battle armor, a sharp black pantsuit and a look of fierce determination, accompanied me to Zara's office in Midtown. The office was sleek and modern, all glass and chrome, but Zara herself was anything but. She was a woman in her late 60s with a mane of silver hair, piercing blue eyes, and an aura of formidable intelligence. I recounted my story for the second time in 24 hours. Zara listened intently, her face impassive, her fingers steepled under her chin. She asked pointed, incisive questions about my finances, my prenuptial agreement, and Liam's business. "Our prenup was ironclad," I explained, feeling a fresh wave of foolishness. "Liam insisted on it. It basically says that what's his is his and what's mine is mine. And I came into this marriage with very little." "Did you work during the marriage, Mrs. Carrington?" Zara asked. "No," I said quietly. "Liam wanted me to focus on our life, on supporting him." "Did you host dinner parties for his business associates? Did you travel with him for work? Did you advise him on aesthetic choices for his company's branding, his offices, the apartments he used to woo investors?" "Yes," I said, surprised. "All the time. I helped design the entire layout and feel of the new Carrington Innovations headquarters. Liam always said I had impeccable taste." A slow, satisfied smile spread across Zara's face. "Impeccable taste that has tangible value, Mrs. Carrington. We're not just going to fight the prenup. We're going to argue that you were an integral part of his business's success. Your work as his wife directly contributed to his net worth. We're going to make a case for a significant portion of the assets acquired during the marriage." For the first time in days, a tiny flicker of hope ignited within me. "And the baby?" I asked, my voice small. "The baby," Zara said, her voice softening slightly, "is your trump card. Liam Carrington can call his child an unfortunate complication in the privacy of his penthouse. But in a court of law, in the glare of the public eye, that child is his heir. And he will be expected to provide for that child in a manner befitting a billionaire's son. We will ensure that." Leaving Zara's office, I felt a shift in my own posture. I was still heartbroken, still reeling from the betrayal. But I was no longer just a victim. I was a client, a plaintiff, a fighter. My newfound resolve was immediately put to the test. As Chloe and I stepped out onto the street, my phone buzzed with a news alert. It was from a major financial news outlet. Carrington Innovations announces major rebranding spearheaded by new Chief Creative Officer Marin Cortez. The article was accompanied by a glossy photo of Liam and Marin standing side by side in the lobby of the Carrington Innovations headquarters. They were beaming, looking every bit the power couple she had proclaimed them to be. The article quoted Liam extensively. "Marin has a vision that is simply unparalleled," he gushed. "She is the future of this company. She's my partner in every sense of the word. We're taking Carrington Innovations to the next level, and it requires a complete overhaul of our old dated aesthetic." My aesthetic, the one he had praised for years. the one I had painstakingly curated. He wasn't just replacing me in his bed, he was systematically erasing every trace of my influence, my taste, my very existence from his life and his business. But the most brutal part of the article was the final paragraph. When asked about his wife Evelyn Carrington and rumors of a separation, Carrington was dismissive. "Evelyn and I are handling things privately," he stated. "She's a wonderful woman, but our lives are moving in different directions. I wish her all the best." He wished me all the best, as if he were a distant acquaintance, not the man who had vowed to love and cherish me for the rest of his life. The public dismissal, the casual erasure, was almost more painful than the private confrontation. "He's not just trying to win Evie," Chloe said, her voice grim as she read the article over my shoulder. "He's trying to annihilate you. He wants to control the narrative, completely paint you as the gentle, naive wife who is gracefully left behind while he and his new dynamic partner conquer the world." I looked down at the phone at the picture of Liam and Marin, the picture of my replacement. The rage was back cold and sharp. "He's not going to win," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "He thinks he's in control. He thinks he can just delete me. But he's forgetting one thing." "What's that?" Chloe asked. I looked up, meeting her gaze, a fire in my own that I didn't know I possessed. "I know all his secrets." Liam Carrington hadn't sprung fully formed onto the pages of Forbes. His past was a carefully edited narrative, a story of grit and genius that he'd polished to a high shine. The official bio was that he'd grown up poor in Queens, a single mother who worked 3 jobs, a scholarship to MIT, and then a relentless climb to the top. It was a good story, inspiring, and mostly it was a lie. I knew the real story, or at least parts of it. The parts he'd let slip in rare, unguarded moments, usually after too much expensive wine and a successful IPO. He wasn't from Queens. He was from Greenwich, Connecticut, and his mother hadn't been a struggling waitress. She had been the live-in housekeeper for a very wealthy, very powerful family, the Vanderbilts. Not the famous Vanderbilts of Gilded Age history, but a more modern, discreetly powerful branch of the family, headed by a patriarch named Alistair Vanderbilt. Liam had grown up in the shadow of their immense wealth, a ghost in their grand estate. He had been the boy in the background, the housekeeper's son, privy to their lives of effortless privilege, but never a part of them. It was the source of his ambition, the chip on his shoulder that drove him with a terrifying intensity. He wasn't just trying to get rich. He was trying to exorcise the ghost of the boy he once was. He was trying to become more powerful, more influential than the family that had employed his mother. He had told me once, his voice thick with a bitterness that years of success had not managed to erase, that Alistair Vanderbilt had a son, Julian. They were the same age, and Liam had despised him with a passion that was almost pathological. Julian was everything Liam was not: born to wealth, effortlessly charming, entitled. Julian was the legitimate heir. Liam was the illegitimate shadow. This was the secret I held, the key to understanding the man who had so callously discarded me. His obsession with legacy, with building an empire, it wasn't just about money. It was about rewriting his own history. And his sudden, brutal rejection of me and our unborn son, it suddenly made a twisted kind of sense. In his mind, I was creating another version of him, a son who would grow up in the shadow of a powerful father, a potential weakness, a reminder of the vulnerability he had spent his entire life trying to escape. Marin, with her sharp edges and ruthless ambition, was not a mother figure. She was a fellow warrior. She wouldn't create a vulnerability. She would help him build higher walls. "We need to go to Greenwich," I told Chloe, my mind racing. "Greenwich?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because Liam's entire life is built on a lie," I said. "And I think the truth is buried there." The next day we drove up to Greenwich. It was a world away from the frantic energy of Manhattan. Manicured lawns, stately homes hidden behind high stone walls, a quiet old money elegance that felt both serene and oppressive. With a little digging, using the skills Chloe had honed as an investigative journalist, we found the Vanderbilt estate, It was even grander than I had imagined, a sprawling stone mansion that looked like something out of a period drama. We didn't go to the front gate. Instead, we went to a small local library in the town center. We spent hours poring over old newspapers and local archives on microfilm, the scent of old paper and dust filling the air. We were looking for anything that connected Liam or his mother to the Vanderbilts. And then we found it. A small article from a local newspaper dated 35 years ago. The headline was innocuous: "Local family mourns tragic loss." The article detailed the accidental drowning of Alistair Vanderbilt's 15-year-old son Julian in the family's swimming pool. A terrible tragedy. But it was the last paragraph that made my blood run cold. The family has asked for privacy during this difficult time. Sources close to the family say that a young house guest, Liam, the son of the family's housekeeper, was present at the time of the accident and is being treated for shock. My hands trembled as I read the words. Liam had never mentioned this. He had never told me that he was there when his childhood nemesis, the object of his intense jealousy, had died. My God, Evie. Chloe whispered, her eyes wide. What if it wasn't an accident? The question hung in the air, dark and terrifying. Was it possible? Was the foundation of Liam's entire empire, his entire life, built on something far more sinister than a lie about his upbringing? We kept digging. We searched for information about Liam's mother. We found her name, Elena, and discovered that she had left her job with the Vanderbilts abruptly after Julian's death. She had moved to Queens, taken a job as a waitress, and raised Liam alone. She had died of cancer when Liam was in college. The official narrative, the one Liam had so carefully constructed, had been a twisted version of the truth. He had taken the reality of his mother's later life and erased the privileged and possibly traumatic context that had preceded it. Our final stop was a small, unassuming church on the outskirts of town. We found Elena's grave in the adjoining cemetery. It was a simple headstone, weathered by the years. As I stood there looking at the name of the woman who had been my mother-in-law, a woman I had never known, I felt a profound sense of sadness. She too had been a victim of the Vanderbilts in her own way. As we were about to leave, an elderly woman, her back bent with age, was placing fresh flowers on a nearby grave. She looked over at us, her eyes kind and curious. "Are you family of Elena's?" she asked, her voice thin and reedy. I was her daughter-in-law." I said the words, feeling strange on my tongue. The woman's eyes widened in recognition. "You must be Liam's wife. I remember Elena, such a sweet woman, and so fiercely protective of that boy, especially after the terrible business at the Vanderbilt place." "You knew her then?" Chloe asked, her journalist's instincts kicking in. "Oh yes," the woman said, nodding. "My husband was the gardener at the estate for 40 years. I remember that day like it was yesterday, the screaming, the chaos. Everyone said it was an accident, but my Arthur, he never believed it." "What did he believe?" I asked, my heart pounding. The old woman leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He said the boys had been fighting. Julian was a terrible bully, you see, always tormenting poor Liam. Arthur said he heard them shouting at each other by the pool just before it happened. He said he heard Julian call Liam a charity case and the help's brat. Then there was a splash and then silence. By the time Arthur got there, it was too late. Liam was just standing there staring at the water, his face pale as a ghost." She shook her head sadly. "Alistair Vanderbilt hushed it all up, of course, for the sake of the family name. They paid Elena a handsome sum to leave and keep quiet. But my Arthur always said there was more to that story. He said he saw a look in that boy Liam's eyes that day. A look of triumph." The drive back to Manhattan was silent. The implications of what we had learned were staggering. Liam wasn't just a ruthless businessman. He was a man who had from a very young age been capable of unimaginable things to get what he wanted. He had not just climbed his way to the top. He had perhaps cleared his path with a chilling act of violence. This changed Everything. My fight was no longer just about a divorce settlement. It was about protecting my child from a man who was far more dangerous than I had ever known. When I got back to Chloe's apartment, there was an email waiting for me. It was from Liam. The subject line was simply, "Let's be reasonable." The email was cold and clinical. It contained a settlement offer, a one-time payment of $5 million in exchange for my signature on a non-disclosure agreement that would forbid me from ever speaking about him, his business, or our marriage to anyone ever. It was in his world a paltry sum, a nuisance fee to make me go away. The final line of the email was a veiled threat. "Take the deal, Evelyn. It's the best you're going to get. Don't make this messy. You won't win." I looked at the email, and then I thought about the old woman in the cemetery, the story of the two boys by the pool, the look of triumph in a young boy's eyes. He thought this was about money. He thought he could buy my silence. He was still underestimating me. I forwarded the email to Zara with a single message: "Decline the offer. We're going to war." And then I began to type an email of my own. Not to Liam, not to my lawyer, but to Alistair Vanderbilt. I didn't know if he would respond. I didn't know if he would even remember the housekeeper's son from all those years ago. But I had to try. I had to let him know that someone else knew the truth about what had happened that day by the pool. The subject line was simple, Julian. And in the body of the email I wrote just one sentence: "I think we need to talk about your son. And mine." The game had changed. I wasn't just fighting a cheating husband anymore. I was confronting a monster. And I would use his darkest secret to protect my future and the future of the child he had so carelessly tried to erase. The endgame was indeed beginning, but it was going to be mine. The silence that followed my email to Alistair Vanderbilt was deafening. Days turned into a week. I checked my inbox obsessively, my stomach in a constant knot of anxiety and anticipation. Had he even seen it? Had his assistants dismissed it as spam? Or had he seen it and chosen to ignore it to leave the ghosts of the past undisturbed? During this week of waiting, Liam and Maren escalated their public relations offensive. They were everywhere, a fawning feature in a glossy magazine about their dynamic partnership, complete with a photo shoot in his penthouse. Maren had redecorated, of course. My carefully chosen warm, neutral palette had been replaced with stark black and white chrome and jarring modern art. It was cold, impersonal, and screamed of power. The article subtly painted me as a relic of Liam's past, the starter wife, who couldn't keep up with his meteoric rise. Maren's Instagram became even more pointed. She posted a photo of a sonogram. It wasn't hers. It was a stock image, I was sure of it, but the implication was clear. The caption read, "Building our own legacy, the right way. Cat Endgame." She was taunting me, using the very thing that should have been my private joy, my pregnancy, as a weapon against me. The cruelty was breathtaking. Chloe was my rock, a constant source of outrage and strategic advice. "She's trying to get under your skin, Evie. Don't let her." Zara, my lawyer, was more clinical. "This is good for us," she'd said over the phone. "Every post, every public statement, it's more ammunition. He's creating a public narrative of cruelty and emotional distress. A judge will not look kindly on this." But legal strategy was a cold comfort in the dead of night when the loneliness and the humiliation felt all-consuming. I would lie awake in Chloe's guest room, my hands on my growing belly, and whisper promises to my unborn son. "I will protect you," I'd murmur into the darkness. "I will not let him erase you." Then on a Tuesday morning it came, an email from a private encrypted address. The sender's name was simply AV. My heart leaped into my throat. The message was brief and to the point. "I will be at the bar of the Carlisle Hotel tomorrow at 3 p.m. Come alone." The Carlisle. Old world, discreet, a place for secrets. He had chosen his ground carefully. The man who sat in the dimly lit corner of the bar looked every inch the patriarch I had imagined. Alistair Vanderbilt was in his late 70s with a shock of white hair, a face etched with the lines of wealth and grief, and eyes that were a pale, watery blue. He was impeccably dressed in a tweed jacket, his posture ramrod straight. He looked at me with an unnerving stillness as I approached his gaze, taking in my pregnant form with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Mrs. Carrington," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. He did not stand. "You asked for this meeting. You have 5 minutes." "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Vanderbilt." I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I know this must be difficult, but I believe we have a shared interest." "I doubt that very much," he said, his tone icy. "What I have is a 35-year-old wound that you have chosen to pour salt into for reasons I cannot begin to fathom." "The reason is sitting right in front of you," I said, placing a hand on my belly. "I am carrying Liam Carrington's son, and he has told me that this child, his own son, is an unfortunate complication. He is trying to erase us, Mr. Vanderbilt, just as he and your family erased the truth of what happened to your son Julian." His composure cracked. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "The official inquiry found my son's death to be an accident. And you paid Liam's mother a great deal of money to disappear and to ensure that was the only story ever told." I countered, my voice low but firm. "I spoke to a woman who knew her. Her husband was your gardener. He heard Julian and Liam arguing just before it happened. He said Julian was bullying him, as he always did." Alistair Vanderbilt stared into his untouched glass of water, his knuckles white as he gripped it. The silence stretched thick with the weight of decades of unspoken grief and suspicion. "Julian could be difficult." He finally conceded, the words seeming to cause him physical pain. "He was my son, my heir. I loved him, but I was not blind to his faults. He had a cruel streak, especially with those he considered beneath him." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a weary sadness. "And Liam was always in Julian's eyes beneath him." "Liam has spent his entire life trying to prove Julian wrong," I said. "He has built an empire fueled by rage and resentment. He despises weakness, Mr. Vanderbilt, and now he sees his own son as a weakness, a reminder of a past he wants to forget. He will stop at nothing to protect the life he has built on that foundation." "What is it you want from me?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to ensure my son's future," I said, leaning forward. "Liam has offered me a pittance to sign an NDA and disappear. I have refused. My lawyer believes we have a strong case, but Liam has unlimited resources. He will drag this out. He will try to bury me in legal fees and public humiliation. But there is one thing he is more afraid of than anything else." "And what is that, you?" I said simply. "He is terrified of the ghost of Greenwich. The story of what happened at your pool is the one secret that could destroy the image he has so carefully crafted. It could destroy his business. His investors would flee. His endgame partner would see him not as a warrior, but as a frightened boy with a dark secret." Alistair was silent for a long time. He looked out the window at the traffic moving slowly along Madison Avenue, but I knew he was seeing something else entirely. A swimming pool. 2 boys. A lifetime of regret. "Liam Carrington stole my son's future," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "He stood by and watched him die. Whether it was an accident or something more, he did nothing. And my family, we enabled him. We bought his silence. We allowed him to go on and build a life on the ashes of my sons." He turned his gaze back to me, and for the first time I saw not a powerful patriarch but a broken father. And now he intends to do the same to his own child, to cast him aside. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. It had only a name, Arthur Finch, and a phone number. "This is my personal lawyer," Alistair said, sliding the card across the table. "He is not a pit bull like the woman you have undoubtedly hired. He is quieter, more discreet, but he is far more dangerous. He has managed my family's affairs for 40 years. He knows where all the bodies are buried, figuratively speaking, of course." He finally met my eyes, and in their depths I saw a new cold resolve. Tell your lawyer to contact Mr. Finch. We will not be involving ourselves in your divorce directly. That would be unseemly. But we can provide leverage, financial records, testimony from old staff, things that Mr. Carrington would prefer to remain in the past. We can make it clear to his legal team that if this matter is not settled to your satisfaction quickly, quietly, and very, very generously, then the past may not stay buried after all. He stood up, his 5 minutes clearly over. He will not do to your son what he did to mine, he said, his voice like a shard of ice. The Vanderbilt family will not allow it. He turned and walked away without a backward glance, leaving me alone in the quiet corner of the bar, the business card a heavy, powerful weight in my hand. I had come seeking an ally. I had found something far more potent. I had found a king long dormant who had just been reminded that a debt of blood had yet to be paid. The war was not just mine anymore. Liam had picked a fight with his past, and the past was about to fight back. I walked out of the Carlisle, my hand on my belly, a fierce, protective smile on my face. The endgame was coming. But the players and the rules had just dramatically changed. So what happens when a ghost from the past, backed by old money and an even older grudge, enters the fray? Liam's carefully constructed empire, built on a foundation of lies, began to tremble. The unfortunate complication he'd tried to discard was now backed by a force he could not bully by or control. The battle that followed was not fought on Instagram or in the tabloids, but in hushed, terrified phone calls between lawyers, and in the sudden, inexplicable drying up of investor confidence. Marin, his endgame, soon discovered that the throne she had so eagerly usurped was perched on a sinkhole. This wasn't just my story of heartbreak and betrayal. It became a story of reclamation. It's a testament to the fact that no woman is ever just a phase, and that a mother's love for her unborn child can be the most powerful force on earth. The hum of the ultrasound machine was supposed to be the soundtrack to the happiest day of her life. They were about to see their baby for the first time. Her husband, Torrin, a man who could buy cities, held her hand, his grip like ice. As the doctor showed them the tiny beating heart, he leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper meant only for her. What a mistake. He thought his secret was safe. He thought his money could bury the truth. But he never counted on the doctor in that room, a woman who saw more than just a picture on a screen. She saw his lie, and she was about to reveal a shocking truth that would shatter a gilded world forever. The silence in the Bentley was a familiar character in their marriage. It was a heavy, opulent silence, cushioned by hand-stitched leather and the whisper-quiet engine, but a silence nonetheless. Torrin Hawthorne, her husband of 3 years, drove with an unnerving stillness, his eyes fixed on the rain-slicked streets of New York City. His profile, sharp and handsome like a Roman coin, was a mask of serene indifference. To the outside world, he was a titan of industry, the brilliant CEO of Hawthorne Holdings, a man whose Midas touch turned every venture into gold. To Katya, he was becoming a beautiful, unknowable stranger. Their home, a sprawling penthouse on Park Avenue that Torrin called the Observatory, for its floor-to-ceiling windows felt less like a home and more like a museum. Every piece of art, every piece of furniture had been chosen by him. Her life, she was beginning to realize, had also been curated. She had been a promising art historian at the Met when they met. He had swept her off her feet with a whirlwind romance that felt like a fairy tale, dinners in Paris, surprise trips to see the Northern Lights, a blinding diamond that felt more like a beautiful handcuff. He had convinced her to leave her job. An artist needs a patron, Katya, he'd said, and a historian needs to be surrounded by history in the making. Your work is me now. It's us. And she, blinded by love and the sheer force of his personality, had agreed. Now her days were a structured series of luncheons with the wives of his business associates, charity galas, where her only role was to smile, and where his chosen designer, and long quiet afternoons, staring out at a city she lived in but no longer felt a part of. The pregnancy had been her idea, a desperate attempt to build a bridge across the growing chasm between them. She thought a baby, a piece of both of them, would force him to see her again, not just the polished accessory on his arm. When she told him, his reaction was muted, a flicker of something unreadable in his cool gray eyes, a tight smile, a Hawthorne air he'd said the words tasting of legacy and lineage, not love and joy. We'll need to adjust the nursery plans. The ride to the renowned obstetrician Dr. Anya Sharma was no different. He hadn't wanted to come. It's the 20-week scan, Torrin, she had pleaded. We'll find out the gender. It's important. He had sighed a long-suffering sound. I have the merger with Sterling Thorne Katya. It's a delicate phase. This is more important than Sterling Thorne. She had said, a rare spark of defiance flashing within her. His jaw had tightened. Fine. I'll move my meeting with Mr. Sterling. But let's be efficient. Now in the sterile, quiet room, the scent of antiseptic cleaner sharp in the air, that efficiency was all he radiated. He checked his Patek Philippe watch twice while the technician prepped her. Katya lay on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her, her stomach bare and covered in a cold, clear gel. Dr. Sharma entered with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was a sharp, observant woman in her late 40s with a reputation for being one of the best. Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, ready for the big show. Ready as we'll ever be, Katya said, trying to inject some lightness into the room. Torrin simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the large monitor. The technician, a young woman named Chloe, moved the transducer across Katya's belly. A monochrome world swirled into existence on the screen. It was abstract at first, a collection of shadows and light. Then Chloe pointed, and there we are. See that little flicker? That's the heartbeat. Strong and steady. Tears instantly welled in Katya's eyes. A tiny pulsating light in the darkness. It was real. A life. Her baby. She turned to Torrin, her heart overflowing, expecting to see a reflection of her own awe. His face was stone. He wasn't looking at the heartbeat. He was looking at the vague outline of a tiny head, the curve of a minuscule spine. His hand, which had been resting limply on hers, tightened. She thought it was a gesture of shared emotion until he leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. The warmth of his breath was a stark contrast to the icy cruelty of his words. It's a mistake. The whisper was so low, so venomous, it was like a snake bite. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd misheard. The hum of the machine, the doctor's cheerful commentary, surely she'd imagined it. But then she saw the subtle shift in his jaw, the cold finality in his eyes as he looked away from the screen and stared at a blank spot on the wall. He had said it. He had looked at their child, their miracle, and declared it a mistake. The air rushed out of her lungs. The tears that had been tears of joy turned to ash, burning her cheeks. Her hand went cold in his. The room, which had felt full of life and promise a moment before, was suddenly a tomb. Dr. Sharma and Chloe were oblivious, their professional chatter filling the void. Everything looks perfect, Katya. Limbs are all there. Measurements are right on track. Do you want to know the gender? Her voice was a strangled whisper. I don't know. Torrin released her hand and stood up, smoothing his bespoke suit jacket. I have to take a call. The Sterling Thorne merger won't wait. He looked at Dr. Sharma, a mask of polite apology firmly in place. Doctor, please send the bill to my office. Katya, my driver, Thomas, will take you home. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at the screen again. He just walked out, leaving her half-naked on a paper-lined table with the ghost of his words echoing in the silent spaces of her heart. A mistake. Her baby. Their baby. A mistake. Dr. Sharma's cheerful demeanor had vanished. She looked from the empty doorway back to Katya's tear-streaked face. She turned to Chloe. Chloe, could you give Mrs. Hawthorne some privacy to get dressed? And please hold all my calls for the next 15 minutes. Once Chloe had left Dr. Chasur, Sharma pulled a stool over her expression, a mixture of professional concern and something deeper. Something intensely human. She saw the devastation. She had to have seen Torrin's chilling detachment. Katya, she said softly, her voice a lifeline. Deep breaths. Can you tell me what happened just now? Katya shook her head, a sob catching in her throat. He said. She couldn't repeat it. Saying it out loud would make it irrevocably real. Dr. Sharma didn't press. She simply placed a comforting hand on Katya's arm. Torin's reaction was unusual, especially for a first-time father. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, held Katya's. I have been a patient of the Hawthorne family's preferred hospital network for years. Torin's medical file is extensive. I took the liberty of reviewing it before this appointment as a matter of due diligence. Katya frowned, confused. His medical file, why, doctor? Sharma hesitated, as if weighing her next words on a scale of professional ethics versus human decency. There was a notation from his primary care physician, a Dr. Alistair Finch, to cross-reference his records with any spousal maternity care. It was an odd flag, so I looked into it. She took a deep breath. Katya, what I'm about to tell you is a serious breach of patient confidentiality. But given what I just witnessed, I believe it is a matter of your safety and well-being. A cold dread far colder than the ultrasound gel seeped into Katya's bones. What is it? Torin had a severe case of mumps as a teenager? She began, her voice low and steady. It was complicated by a condition called orchitis, inflammation of the testicles. The medical terms meant little to Katya. She was still stuck on the word mistake. The inflammation caused significant irreparable damage. Dr. Sharma continued, her gaze unwavering. We ran a series of tests on him afterward. I have the records here. Katya, Torin Hawthorne is and has been since he was 16 years old completely and irreversibly sterile. His condition is called azoospermia. There is a 0% chance that he can conceive a child naturally. The room began to spin. The black and white image of her baby on the screen seemed to mock her. 0% chance. Sterile. Irreversible. What are you saying? She stammered, her mind refusing to connect the dots. Dr. Sharma's voice was gentle, but her words were devastatingly clear. I'm saying, Katya, that Torin knows he cannot be the father of your baby. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a gunshot. His muted reaction to the pregnancy, his distance, his controlling nature, and the whisper. It's a mistake. The mistake wasn't the baby. The mistake wasn't the pregnancy. The mistake was that she had gotten pregnant at all, because he knew with absolute scientific certainty that he wasn't the father. He hadn't been accusing the baby of being a mistake. He had been accusing her. The drive home from Dr. Sharma's office was a blur. Thomas Torin's stoic driver navigated through the city traffic with his usual silent competence, occasionally glancing at Katya in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed with what might have been concern. She sat numbly in the back of the Bentley, the plush leather feeling like a cage. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, a gesture that was now fraught with a terrifying new meaning. Dr. Sharma's words echoed in her mind, a relentless, deafening drumbeat. Sterile. Irreversible. 0% chance. The doctor had been kind. She had given Katya a glass of water, a box of tissues, and the space to let the initial shock wash over her. She had also given her a warning. A man like Torin Hawthorne, with his resources and his pride. He will not take this revelation lightly, Katya. He is not a man who likes his narrative to be challenged. Be careful. She had printed a copy of the diagnostic report from Torin's file, a document dated over a decade ago, signed by a Dr. Alistair Finch, detailing the diagnosis of azoospermia. Proof is your only power now, she'd said, sliding it into a plain manila envelope. Guard this with your life. Back in the sterile perfection of the observatory, Katya walked through the cavernous living room like a ghost. The Warhol prints on the wall seemed to scream in silent mockery. The cityscape outside, usually a source of comfort, felt alien and menacing. Her whole life, this beautiful, curated life, was a lie, a meticulously constructed sham. She had not cheated on Torin. Not once. The very idea was absurd. She loved him, or she had loved the man she thought he was. Her mind raced frantically, trying to find an explanation. Any explanation other than the one staring her in the face. A miracle. A misdiagnosis. A 1 in a billion chance. But Dr. Sharma's certainty had been absolute. The proof was in the envelope clutched in her hand. If she hadn't cheated and he was sterile, then how was she pregnant? The question was a black hole threatening to swallow her whole. Torin came home late that evening. She heard his keys in the door, the soft click as he locked it behind him. She was sitting in the dark, the envelope on the marble coffee table in front of her. She hadn't moved for hours. He switched on a low lamp and the room was bathed in a soft golden glow. He loosened his tie, his movements fluid and confident. Katya. Why are you sitting in the dark? He didn't sound angry, just weary. The powerful CEO home from a long day of empire building. We need to talk, Torin, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. Can it wait? The Sterling Thorn deal is at a critical juncture. I'm exhausted. No, she said, her voice gaining strength. It can't wait. She gestured to the envelope. I had a very enlightening conversation with Dr. Sharma today, after you left. A flicker of something anger, fear crossed his face before being instantly suppressed, replaced by a look of paternalistic concern. He walked over and sat in the armchair opposite her, creating a deliberate distance between them. Are you all right? Is the baby okay? You seemed overwrought at the clinic. The casual cruelty of his words, the way he pretended her distress was just hormonal imbalance, ignited a fire in her chest. The baby is fine. But you know that, don't you? You saw the heartbeat. You also called our baby a mistake. He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. Katya, you misheard. The room was noisy. I was talking about the merger. Don't lie to me, Torin, she said, her voice rising. Don't you dare lie to me. I heard you perfectly, and now I know why you said it. She pushed the envelope across the table. Dr. Sharma showed me this. Your medical file. From when you were 16. He glanced at the envelope but didn't touch it. A slow, cold smile spread across his lips, and the mask of the concerned husband dissolved, revealing the monster beneath. It was a chilling transformation. Dr. Sharma seems to have a problem with patient confidentiality, he said smoothly, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. I'll have my legal team address that with the hospital board. She'll be lucky to practice medicine in this state again. This isn't about Dr. Sharma. This is about you, about us. Katya was on her feet now, her body trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. You're sterile, Torin. You have been for years. You knew you couldn't be this baby's father. You let me believe. You let me think I was going crazy. Why? He stood up, his height and presence suddenly overwhelming in the dimly lit room. He was no longer the charming man she had married. He was a predator. I didn't let you believe anything, Katya, he purred, taking a step towards her. I reacted to a simple biological fact. You came to me, told me you were pregnant. I am your husband. What was I to conclude? The implication hit her like a physical blow. You think I cheated on you. He gave a small, dismissive shrug. The science is quite clear. I cannot have children. You are having a child. The conclusion is elementary, my dear. I was willing, for the sake of appearances, to overlook your indiscretion, to raise the child as my own, to give it the Hawthorne name, the Hawthorne legacy. All I asked for was your discretion. But you couldn't even manage that. You had to create this drama. It was gaslighting of the highest order. So complete, so audacious that for a moment she almost questioned her own reality. He was twisting her fidelity into a betrayal, her joy into a scandal. He was painting himself as the magnanimous cuckolded husband willing to forgive her transgression for the sake of his name. The mistake he'd referred to wasn't just her pregnancy, it was her failure to keep the secret of her affair. "I never cheated on you," she whispered, horrified. "I would never." "Then how do you explain it?" He shot back, his voice like a whip. "A divine, immaculate conception. Did an angel visit you while I was closing the deal in Tokyo?" Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. "I don't know. That's what I'm asking you, but I know I was faithful to you." He laughed, a short, ugly sound devoid of humor. "Fidelity, a quaint concept. It doesn't matter anymore. You've made it matter. By bringing this out into the open, you've forced my hand." He walked to the bar and poured himself a whiskey, his back to her. "You will carry this child. When it is born, you will sign over all parental rights to me. I will have a non-disclosure agreement drawn up, a very generous one. You will be well compensated for your services. Then you will disappear. You will move to Europe or California, I don't care. You will never contact me or the child again." Katya stared at him aghast. "You want to buy my baby? You want me to give you my child and just leave?" "It's not your child," he said, turning to face her, his eyes like chips of ice. "Genetically, it is half yours. But it will be a hawthorn. It will be raised as my heir. You are merely the vessel, a very beautiful but ultimately disappointing vessel." The cruelty was breathtaking. He was systematically dismantling her identity, wife, partner, and now mother. She was nothing to him but a means to an end, an incubator for an heir he desperately needed but couldn't produce himself. Her mind reeled back to the central, impossible question. If she hadn't cheated and he was sterile, the answer had to lie somewhere in the space between those two truths. And Torin, in his arrogance, had just given her a clue. He wasn't surprised by the pregnancy. He was angry it had become complicated. He had a plan already in place. This wasn't a shock to him. This was an inconvenience. Her fear began to morph into something else. A cold, hard resolve. He was a liar. He was a manipulator. And he had underestimated her. "No," she said, the word tasting of newfound power. He raised an eyebrow. "No, no. I will not give you my child. I will not disappear. And I will find out the truth." For the first time since she'd met him, Torin Hawthorne looked genuinely surprised. He studied her for a long moment, a predator reassessing its prey. Then he smiled again, that same chilling, empty smile. "You have nothing, Katya," he said softly. "You signed a prenuptial agreement that leaves you with exactly what you came with, which was nothing. You have no job. Your friends are my friends. Your family is—" "Where exactly?" "That brother you never speak to. You live in my home. You eat my food. You wear my clothes. You are nothing without me. Do not make the mistake of thinking you can fight me. It's a battle you will lose. Miserably." He finished his whiskey and placed the glass down with a decisive click. "The offer stands until the day you give birth. Think carefully about your next move, because I will be thinking about mine." He walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the silence. But this time the silence was different. It was no longer empty. It was filled with the clarion call of war. He was right about one thing. She had a brother. A brother she hadn't spoken to in years because he'd seen the monster in Torin long before she had. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. She scrolled through the contacts past the names of society wives and charity organizers until she found the one she was looking for, Liam Vance, her estranged, brilliant lawyer brother, her only hope. She pressed the call button, her heart pounding against her ribs. He answered on the second ring. "Katya." His voice was full of surprise. They hadn't spoken since her wedding day when he'd pulled her aside and begged her not to marry Torin. "He's a shark, Katya. He'll eat you alive." She had called him jealous and dramatic. "Liam," she sobbed, the dam of her composure finally breaking. "Liam, I need your help." "You were right. You were right about everything." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of a chair scraping against a floor. "Katja. What's wrong? Where are you?" Liam's voice had shed its surprise and was now sharp with concern. "I'm at home." At the penthouse, she choked out between sobs. "Liam, I'm in trouble. I'm pregnant and torn." "I'm on my way," he cut in. No hesitation. "Don't say anything else over the phone. Are you safe right now?" "Is he there?" "He's here, but in his study." "I'm okay for now. Lock your bedroom door. Don't talk to him. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Just hang on, Katja. I'm coming." The line went dead. For the first time in hours, a tiny sliver of hope pierced through Katja's terror. Liam had always been her protector. Growing up, he was the one who'd patched up her scraped knees and stood up to bullies. He'd gone to Columbia Law while she'd pursued art history at NYU. Their paths diverged, but the bond had been unbreakable until Torrin had systematically severed it, framing Liam's protectiveness as jealousy and disapproval of his wealth. "He can't stand to see you happy, Katja," Torrin had said. And she, a fool, had believed him. True to his word, 30 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. It was the front desk. "Mr. Hawthorne, a Mr. Liam Vance is here to see you." The doorman, of course, assumed Liam was here to see the man of the house. Torrin's voice came over the internal speaker, cold and clipped. "I'm not expecting a Mr. Vance. Send him away." Her blood ran cold. He was trying to isolate her completely. She grabbed her phone and texted Liam frantically. "He won't let you up. He's trying to block me in." Liam's reply was almost instant. "Go to the service elevator at the end of the hall. Now!" Her heart hammered against her ribs. The service elevator was used by catering staff and maintenance. Torrin would never think to monitor it. She slipped out of the living room, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floors. She could hear Torrin on a phone call in his study, his voice a low, angry murmur. She crept down the long hallway past the gallery of curated art, her hand still protectively on her belly. The service elevator was utilitarian and stark. She jabbed the button and prayed. The doors slid open with a quiet hum, and there stood Liam. He looked older than she remembered. His sandy hair was a little shorter, and there were fine lines around his eyes. But those eyes were the same, fiercely intelligent and full of a protective warmth that she suddenly realized she had been starved of for 3 years. He pulled her into a hug, and she clung to him, the sobs she'd been suppressing finally breaking free. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "I've got you. Let's get out of here." They rode the elevator down in silence. He led her out a back exit into a grimy alley she'd never known existed, a world away from the polished lobby of Park Avenue. The cold night air was a shock to her system. He hailed a yellow cab, and soon they were speeding away, the glittering lights of her prison shrinking in the distance. Liam's apartment in Greenwich Village was the complete antithesis of her penthouse. It was cluttered with books, legal pads, and a friendly-looking ficus tree. It smelled of coffee and old paper. It felt real. He sat her down on a worn leather sofa, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and made her a cup of tea. As she sipped the hot, sweet liquid, the story came tumbling out. She told him everything. The ultrasound, Torrin's whisper, Dr. Sharma's revelation, the medical report which she'd had the presence of mind to shove into her purse, the horrifying confrontation, the gaslighting, Torrin's ultimatum to take her baby and disappear. Liam listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with every word. He took the medical report and read it carefully, his lawyerly gaze missing nothing. When she was finished, a heavy silence filled the room. "That son of a bitch," he said, his voice a low growl. "I knew he was a controlling bastard, but this is sociopathic." He looked at her, his eyes full of a pain that mirrored her own. "Katja, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you." "It's not your fault," she whispered. "He's a master manipulator. He isolated me and I let him." Liam shook his head. "No more. That ends tonight. First things first, He can't force you to give up your child. Parental rights are not a commodity to be bought and sold. His threats are designed to terrorize you into submission. But he has so much power, Liam. The best lawyers, the judges. He told me he'd ruin Dr. Sharma. He'll try, Liam said, his jaw tight. But Dr. Sharma has ethics on her side, and a good lawyer, which I will make sure she has, can argue that her duty of care to you, a patient in clear distress, superseded her duty of confidentiality to him, especially when he was using that confidentiality to perpetrate fraud and emotional abuse. He started pacing his mind, clearly working. The prenup is another issue. Torin's legal team is the best money can buy. They would have made it ironclad. He's right that you'd likely walk away with very little. But we're not going after his money. We're going for something more important, your freedom, your child, and the truth. He stopped and looked at her. Katya, this is critical. You said you never cheated. Never, she said with absolute conviction. I believe you, he said immediately. Which leaves a gaping hole in the middle of this. You are pregnant. He is sterile. He knew he was sterile. Yet he wasn't entirely surprised by the pregnancy. He was just angry it became public knowledge between you. He already had a plan to take the baby. This suggests he was expecting a child. Just not in this messy way. Her own thoughts, which had been a chaotic storm, began to clear as Liam laid them out with such logical precision. He was expecting a child. She repeated the idea, solidifying. So, how? There are ways, Liam said, starting to list them on his fingers. Surrogacy, for one. But you're the one who's pregnant, so that's out. Adoption possible, but the timeline doesn't fit. That leaves assisted reproductive technology. IVF. The acronym hung in the air. In vitro fertilization. But IVF, with what she asked, confused. His sperm is non-viable. Exactly? Liam said, his eyes gleaming with a hunter's intensity. It would have to be with donor sperm. But you would know if you went through an IVF cycle, Katya. The hormone injections, the procedures. You'd know. She shook her head. No, nothing like that ever happened. They were silent for a moment, both staring at the impossible puzzle. A pregnancy without intercourse with a fertile partner, and without a clinical IVF procedure. It made no sense. Unless... Liam began slowly, his eyes narrowing. Unless the insemination happened without your knowledge. The blood drained from her face. What? How is that even possible? I don't know, he admitted. It sounds like something out of a spy novel. But with a man like Torin, a man with infinite resources and a complete lack of a moral compass, we can't rule anything out. We have to start thinking like he does. Where are the vulnerabilities? Where could he have intervened? He grabbed a legal pad and a pen. Okay, let's be systematic. Think back. Katya, any unusual medical appointments? Procedures? Even a routine checkup that felt off? Any new vitamins or medications he insisted you take? She racked her brain, replaying the last 9 months in her head. Torin was obsessed with their health, but she had always seen it as part of his controlling nature. He'd switched her gynecologist about a year ago to a private clinic. He'd vetted a place called the Westwood Wellness Clinic, run by a Dr. Lena Hansen. It was exclusive, expensive, and catered to the city's elite. She'd had her annual checkup there. There was my annual pap smear at the Westwood Clinic, she said slowly. About 9 months ago. It was routine. Dr. Hansen was very professional, very slick. Anything else? Torin started me on a new regimen of prenatal vitamins about a month before that, she recalled. He had them specially formulated by a compounding pharmacy in Switzerland. He said they were the purest, most effective ones available. Liam wrote it all down. Westwood Wellness Clinic. Dr. Lena Hansen. Swiss vitamins. He looked up at her. It's a long shot, Katya, but this is where we start digging. We need to find out who owns Westwood, who Dr. Hansen is connected to, and we need to get our hands on one of those vitamin bottles." He looked at the blanket draped over her, at her exhausted, tear-stained face. His expression softened. "But first you need to rest. You're safe here. Torrin doesn't know this address. I moved 3 years ago after the wedding." The unspoken words hung in the air after she chose him over her brother. "Tomorrow," Liam said, his voice firm with resolve, "we start fighting back. And our first objective is a strategic retreat. You can't go back to the penthouse. We need to get your essential belongings, your passport, your personal documents, anything of sentimental value. We have to do it fast before he realizes you've bolted and locks everything down." The thought of going back into that gilded cage even for a moment filled her with dread. But Liam was right. She couldn't let Torrin erase every trace of her existence. "He'll be at his office all morning," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He has a board meeting. He'll be gone from 8 a.m. to at least noon." Liam nodded. "Okay, we have a 4-hour window. We go in, we get your things, and we get out. And then we disappear while I start digging into Mr. Torrin Hawthorne's beautifully curated world. I have a feeling we're about to find some very ugly secrets hidden in the fine print." That night, huddled on Liam's sofa, Katya finally slept. It was a restless sleep, punctuated by nightmares of cold whispers and icy smiles. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone in the dark. She had an ally, and they had a plan. The great Torrin Hawthorne had made a critical error. He had pushed her so far that she had nothing left to lose, and in doing so, he had transformed his polished, docile wife into an adversary. He had no idea the war he had just started. The next morning, the city was shrouded in a gray, determined drizzle that matched Katya's mood. Liam had already been up for hours, a pot of strong coffee brewing, his laptop open on the dining table, which was now Command Central. "I did a preliminary search on the Westwood Wellness Clinic," he said, handing her a mug. "It's a private entity owned by a holding company called Ethelred Capital. Very opaque. But I found something interesting. The listed agent for Ethelred is a law firm, Sloan, Finch & Associates." The name hit her like a jolt. Finch. The doctor who signed Torrin's sterility report was Dr. Alistair Finch. "Exactly," Liam said, his eyes glinting. "It could be a coincidence, but in this world, I don't believe in them. It seems Dr. Finch didn't just diagnose Torrin. He may have stayed in the family's orbit. Or at least his firm did." The connection was chilling. The doctor who knew Torrin's most profound secret was linked to the clinic where she had her last checkup before the pregnancy. It felt like a deliberate, carefully woven web. "We have to go," she said, her resolve hardening. "The clock is ticking." Liam had arranged for a discreet car service, not a yellow cab. "Torrin will have eyes," he'd said. "Assume we're being watched." The journey back to Park Avenue was fraught with a new kind of terror. This wasn't her home anymore. It was enemy territory. She was a spy on a mission. As planned, Torrin's Bentley was gone from the private garage. They used the service elevator again. Liam carried 2 large empty duffel bags. "Essentials only, Katya," he cautioned as they stepped into the silent, opulent foyer. "Documents, sentimental items, clothes you can't live without. Nothing he can track. Leave the jewelry he bought you. It's just another set of chains." The penthouse was eerily quiet. It was as if the argument from the night before had been sucked into the expensive upholstery, leaving behind a charged, toxic residue. While Liam stood watch at the door, Katya flew into action. She went straight to their bedroom, a vast space of cool grays and chrome that had always felt more like a hotel suite than a sanctuary. She grabbed her passport, her birth certificate, and a small box of old family photos from her bedside table. She packed jeans, sweaters, and sensible shoes, the clothes of the woman she used to be before Torrin had dressed her up like a doll. She left the designer gowns and jewel-encrusted heels hanging in the closet like the shed skin of a former life. Then her eyes fell on the ensuite bathroom. On the marble countertop sat a sleek silver bottle. Vie éternelle prenatal formula, the elegant script read. Torin's specially compounded Swiss vitamins. Her heart pounded. She grabbed the bottle along with a sealed, unopened one from the medicine cabinet. This could be the proof they needed. Her final stop was Torin's study. It was a place she rarely entered, his sanctum sanctorum. The room was dark-paneled in mahogany and smelled of leather and his expensive cologne. It was the heart of his empire and his secrets. "Katja, we need to go," Liam whispered from the doorway. "Just 1 minute," she said, her instincts screaming at her. She went behind his massive desk. She didn't know what she was looking for. His computer was password protected. But in his top desk drawer beneath a stack of neatly organized papers was a slim leather-bound folio. It wasn't a company document. It looked private. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The first page was a contract, a service agreement between Torin Hawthorne and a company she'd never heard of, the Genesis Clinic. Her eyes scanned the legalese until they landed on a phrase that made the air freeze in her lungs. For services rendered in the procurement and cryopreservation of donor gametes. Donor gametes. Sperm. She flipped the page. It was a profile. A donor profile. Donor 734. It listed his physical characteristics: height, hair color, eye color, all remarkably similar to Torin's. It listed his academic achievements and a clean bill of health. But the name was redacted, blacked out with a thick marker. Then she saw the payment schedule, a series of large wire transfers from a private account of Torin's to the Genesis Clinic. And below that, a second set of payments. A monthly retainer paid to a woman, Serafina Dubois. The memo line for each payment was the same consulting fee. Who was Serafina Dubois? A consultant for what? And why was Torin paying a fertility clinic for donor sperm when he was supposedly trying to have a baby with his wife, Katja? Now Liam's voice was urgent. She snapped a picture of every page with her phone, her hands shaking so badly the first few were blurry. She shoved the folio back in the drawer and ran out of the study, her heart threatening to beat its way out of her chest. As they were about to leave, the main elevator dinged. Her blood turned to ice. It couldn't be Torin. He was at his board meeting. The elevator doors slid open and a woman stepped out. She was in her late 60s, impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, her silver hair styled in a flawless chignon. Her face was a mask of aristocratic disdain. It was Jessamine Hawthorne, Torin's mother. She surveyed the scene, Katja clutching a purse, Liam holding 2 duffel bags, and her thin lips curled into a semblance of a smile. It didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Well, well," she said, her voice as crisp and brittle as old money. "Leaving so soon, Katja? And with your brother, the little radical?" I see Torin's assessment of the situation was, as always, astute. Liam stepped in front of Katja protectively. "Mrs. Hawthorne, we're leaving." Jessamine's gaze swept over him dismissively before landing back on Katja. "Are you foolish little girl. Did you really think you could just walk away? Did you think my son, my family would allow a complication like you to disrupt everything?" "This has nothing to do with you, Jessamine," Katja said, finding her voice. "Oh, but it has everything to do with me," she replied, taking a step closer. The scent of her expensive perfume, Jean Patou's Joy, filled the air, a cloying, suffocating fragrance. A legacy is at stake. The Hawthorne name. My grandchild. Her eyes dropped to Katja's stomach and her expression softened into something that for a terrifying moment looked like warmth. "You don't have to run, dear. We can be reasonable. Torin is angry, yes. He is proud. But he can be managed. I can talk to him." She opened her handbag and pulled out a checkbook. "You are carrying a Hawthorne. That makes you important to us. But you are not equipped to be its mother. Give us the child. I will personally see to it that you are set up for life. A new name, a beautiful home in the south of France. Anything you desire. You can live out your days in comfort. All you have to do is sign the papers after the birth and walk away." It was the same offer Torin had made, but coated in a veneer of matriarchal concern that was somehow more repulsive. She wasn't just offering to buy the baby. She was offering Katya a golden cage in exchange for her soul. "He is not a Hawthorne," Katya said, her voice shaking with rage. "I don't know who he is, but he is not a Hawthorne, and he is my son. Mine. He is not for sale." Jessamyn's mask of civility crumbled. Her face hardened, her eyes flashing with a venomous fury that was so much like her son's. "You ungrateful little tramp! You come into my son's life with nothing, and this is how you repay him, by opening your legs to some stranger and trying to pass off your bastard child as his." "That's enough," Liam said, his voice deadly calm. "We're done here." He took Katya's arm and steered her toward the service elevator. Jessamyn's voice followed them down the hall, shrill and laced with panic. "You won't get away with this. Torin will find you. He will take that child from you, and he will leave you with nothing. You will be ruined. Do you hear me? Ruined." The service elevator doors slid shut, cutting off her tirade. Katya collapsed against the wall, trembling uncontrollably. She had known Torin was a monster, but now she knew the monstrosity was inherited. The entire Hawthorne family was rotten to the core. They didn't care about a child. They cared about an heir, a commodity. Back in the car, speeding away from that life for good, Katya showed Liam the photos on her phone. He scrolled through them, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The Genesis Clinic," he muttered. "Donor 734. Serafina Dubois." He looked up at her, his eyes dark with a chilling realization. "Katya, this is darker than we imagined." He wasn't just hiding his sterility. He had a plan, an elaborate premeditated plan to create an heir using a donor, and he was going to pass the child off as his own. "But how did I get pregnant?" she cried, the question still tormenting her. "If I didn't have IVF, how did the donor sperm?" Liam looked at the picture of the vitamin bottle, then back at the legal documents on the phone. "I don't know for sure," he said slowly, his voice grim. "But I have a sickening theory. It's called cryptic insemination. It's highly unethical, illegal in most places, and almost impossible to prove. But for a man with Torin's resources and connections to Dr. Finch's network and a private clinic, he wouldn't need your consent if he could bypass it entirely." The implication was horrifying. The vitamins from Switzerland. The private clinic. Dr. Hansen. Had her routine checkup been anything but? Had she been inseminated like livestock without her knowledge or consent? It was a violation so profound she couldn't wrap her mind around it. "Now we have a name," Liam said, his voice like steel. "Serafina Dubois. She's the key. We find her. We find out her role in all this, and we find out the identity of donor 734. He looked at Katya, his hand covering hers. "This is our new mission. We're not just escaping Katya. We're hunting." They went to ground, retreating to a secluded family cabin in the Catskills. The isolation was a balm to Katya's fractured nerves. While she focused on her health, Liam converted the rustic living room into a war room. He hired a sharp private investigator, an ex-cop named Marcus Thorne, who began charting the dark constellation of Torin's deceit, the doctors, the clinics, and the mysterious Serafina Dubois. The first breakthrough came from the unopened bottle of Swiss vitamins. Liam had it sent to a lab for analysis. The results were sickening. "It's worse than we thought," Liam said, his face grim as he read the report. The pills weren't just nutrients. They contained a powerful sedative and a cocktail of hormones designed to optimize fertility. The clinical words painted a horrifying picture. "He was drugging me," Katya whispered, the violation stealing her breath. She had been an unwilling participant in her own pregnancy. Her anger, once a spark, now hardened into cold, unbreakable resolve. Soon after Marcus Thorne's investigation bore fruit, the money trail laundered through shell corporations led him to Serafina Dubois. He found her address in a discreet Soho apartment building. "I have to see her," Katya declared, her voice firm. The time for hiding was over. They approached with caution. While Liam and Marcus waited nearby, Katya went to the building alone, her heart a steady drum against her ribs. She buzzed the apartment. "My name is Katya Hawthorne," she said into the intercom, her voice clear. "We need to talk about Torin." After a tense silence, the lock clicked open. The woman who answered the door. Serafina was not the cold accomplice Katya had envisioned. She was elegant, with intelligent, weary eyes that held a universe of regret. "Mrs. Hawthorne," she said softly, "I knew this day would come. Please come in." Inside the minimalist apartment, the truth finally spilled out. "I was a geneticist," Serafina began, her hands trembling. "I ran a fertility clinic called Genesis. Torin came to me years ago, obsessed with having a biological heir he knew he could never produce. When I told him it was impossible, he changed the plan. He wanted a child that appeared to be his, using a donor who was a perfect physical match. Donor 734. Katya breathed. Serafina nodded. But that wasn't enough for him. He insisted the child be carried by you to complete the illusion. I told him it was illegal, a monstrous ethical breach. But he had leveraged my brother's gambling debts. Torin paid them, and in return he owned me. He forced me to orchestrate everything. The drugged vitamins, the procedure. Dr. Hansen at the Westwood Clinic was one of his puppets, too. Her voice broke. I am so sorry. I've lived with this guilt every day. The confession was damning, but one final crucial question remained. Who was the donor? Katya asked, her voice trembling. Who is my baby's father? A fresh wave of fear washed over Serafina's face. Torin's cruelty has layers, she explained. He wanted the donor to be someone he could control completely, an insurance policy. He chose his younger brother, Michael. The name landed with the force of a physical blow. Michael Hawthorne, the disowned artist, the family disgrace. Torin despised him, Serafina whispered. He found Michael, offered him life-changing money to be the donor, and forced him to sign an NDA and disappear. It was his ultimate twisted victory to use the genetics of the brother he hated to create the heir he would raise as his own. Armed with Serafina's sworn affidavit, Liam's team moved swiftly. They located Michael Hawthorne living a quiet, anonymous life in a small town on the coast of Maine. He was a painter of melancholic seascapes, a man haunted by a deal he had never fully understood. Katya traveled to Maine to meet him. Standing on a wind-swept cliff overlooking the Atlantic, she saw a man who shared Torin's frame, but none of his menace. His eyes were kind. They were her baby's eyes. I am so sorry, Michael said, his voice thick with regret. I never knew. In that moment, standing beside the stranger, who was the biological father of her child, Katya felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. He was not a ghost. He was family. The final confrontation was not a dramatic showdown, but a swift legal execution. Liam presented Torin's lawyers with their arsenal, Serafina's testimony, the lab reports, Michael's statement, and the threat of criminal charges for assault and unlawful insemination. The story, if made public, would not just tarnish the Hawthorne name, it would obliterate the entire empire. Jessamine Hawthorne attempted a desperate smear campaign, but against the mountain of evidence it was useless. Faced with total ruin, Torin folded. The divorce was quiet and absolute. The fraudulent prenup was voided, and Katya accepted a settlement that would ensure her child's security. She refused to take a penny more of his blood money. Torin relinquished all paternal rights in exchange for their silence on Michael's identity, a final pathetic attempt to control a narrative he had already lost. Katya walked away from the marriage with her freedom, her dignity, and the precious life inside her. 2 months later, she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy boy. She named him Liam after the brother who had saved her, and gave him the last name Vance. He had his Uncle Michael's kind eyes and his mother's resilient spirit. Michael became a quiet, loving presence in their lives, his art slowly filling with a light that had long been absent. Katya never saw Torrin or Jessamine again. The last she heard Hawthorne Holdings was in turmoil, and Torrin had become a recluse in his golden penthouse, a king ruling an empire of shadows. He had his legacy, but he was utterly alone, having lost the future he tried so desperately to steal. Katya, however, had found hers. It wasn't a life of opulence, but it was real, and it was free. Katya's journey started with a shocking betrayal in the cold, sterile light of an ultrasound room, and ended with her reclaiming her strength, her identity, and her future. She escaped a gilded cage, exposed a web of lies that ran deeper than she could ever have imagined, and fought for the most precious thing in her life, her child. Her story is a powerful testament to resilience, the unbreakable bond of family, and the fact that truth is a power that even a millionaire's money cannot suppress. What would you have done in Katya's position? Let us know in the comments below.